Greetings, Blood Angels players, and welcome to this week's tactics video. Today, I'm going to tell you about my first GT using Liberator Assault Group. I'm going to break down how I used my list, what I liked, what I disliked. I'm going to go over everything, and probably next week I'm going to try and break down each of the games so you can get a little bit more in depth. But let's get into it. So, this was the first GT in Inverness with the organisation Loch and I was playing Liberator Assault Group, and I was 11th out of 36 players with 385 battle points. I actually looked back at the GT that I won in the summer, and it was only 30 points less in terms of battle points. So, battle points in this event, I didn't do amazing. But I didn't do too badly either, and I just thought I'd put a nice little picture here of Dante with a unit of like flashkits, and I believe this was a war boss, and Gaskell, and I think Dante actually had battle shocked himself here to get extra attacks on the charge. This was a bit of a scrap, so there's going to be a lot of interesting discussion throughout the video, and hopefully you're going to learn something. But I had fun, and I actually really liked playing Liberator Assault Group. It felt like a really flexible and strong detachment. I just wish maybe I'd picked up another win. So this was the breakdown of the players at the event. There was actually a crap load of Death Guard, a lot of Space Marines. There was one other Blood Angels player, and the event was ultimately won by the Necron, the Grotman's Detachment, which we all knew was very powerful, and I kind of liked that they put the top two tables up on the stage. I actually only got to play one game of the top two tables. This wasn't a great event for me, but it was a good event in terms of like the quality of the event, the food provided. It was a nice hall. You know, sometimes you get halls that don't have a giant roof. The giant roof in here actually meant that, like, you ever been to an event where everybody's talking and it feels so loud and it's hard to hear other people? We had none of that. So I really liked this event, and I really liked the organizer that put the event on. So I think I'll be back, and it was only like 45-minute drive from my house. So, and when I was actually thinking about this event, this is the first event that I've been out with my local city since my second kid was born. Because I actually started to look back. I was like, when on earth did I leave my city for an event? So this is the first time I've gone to like a larger population city in 3 years, and that's good as well, because you don't know what meta you're going to be. You're going to play people you haven't met before, you're going to make some new friends, and you're also going to see some new lists and some new strategies, so you're going to learn some stuff. So I was pleased to go, and because obviously it's out with my local meta, I didn't know what to expect. And in the morning, this was roughly where it was in Scotland, so Scotland's border is just below Glasgow, about an hour below Glasgow, in terms of driving, so like maybe like 60-70 miles below Glasgow. Tallest mountain in Scotland is here, Ben Nevis, and then up here just north of, I think it must be a river, but maybe it's just a body of water that like splits Scotland. North of Inverness was North Keswick, and that's where it was in this picture here. Was taken looking the direction of the arrow. So this was looking out east, maybe like southeasterly on a frosty January morning, and the sun was just beating in, and it was actually quite warm considering we'd had snow the week before. And I was actually dreading going because I was like, oh my god, if the roads are all snowed, how am I going to go to the event? So this is where it was for anyone that was interested. Very north of Scotland. There's a good community of Warhammer players around the north of Scotland. So something has gone wrong with this slide. Brilliant. What a way to start the video. Let me just fix this. I was editing it so none of the slides and none of the text comes up behind my head, so obviously I've done something wrong. So let's get into where I finished, right? Like 3 wins, 2 losses. I think it was a 7-point loss and like a 17-point loss, maybe. Something like that. Oh, and I lied about the battle points. 389. Apparently I can't math. So it was a little bit better than I thought it was. 389. So yeah, about 30 battle points less than my previous victory, and averaging, what, 76 battle points pretty much per turn, per game. Yeah, I played Gav's Astra Militarum. If anyone has watched my stream, they'll know that Gav is a crazy good Warhammer player. Yeah, so it was a 17-point loss. I lost 78-61 in Game 4 against Gav. I usually end up playing Gav in Game 4. And that's like a make or break moment. I think I've played him Game 4 the last 3 tournaments we've been at. And he's beat me twice. I've beat him once, but Gav is a very, very tough opponent. And my good friend Garen, who's been on the stream a couple of times, last time he was on the stream, he brought his orcs for a rematch of the GT final we played. And the time he was on the stream before, he brought that Eradicator nonsense with the Space Wolves. He did really well. This was only a 2-point loss for him, so he was super close to going 5-0. I really hope to play Garen again. I hope I get to play him again at some point. For me, it almost feels like Gav and Garen, they're like the final bosses. Every tournament I go to, I gotta play them in like game 4 or 5, and then if I beat them I can win, and if I lose then I failed at the final hurdle. Unfortunately I didn't get to play Garen this time round, but there'll be another one for sure. And also Colin, who comes on the channel very often. Colin was super keen to beat me on battle points. Like, on the 5th game, he ran over to the table to see if I was winning, and our 5th game was super low scoring. We'll get into that later. And Colin was like, he got 99 in his 5th game. He's like, oh, I'm going to get ahead of you, John. I'm going to get ahead of you. But he failed. I mean, like, come on, Death Guard can't beat Blood Angels. He should have known that. But he was really pleased with his 99 in game 5. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't a GT win. Like we did basically last time I went to a GT, but I actually think I put on a fairly good showing of myself. And I think I was struggling. I'd said before I went to this event, I was struggling in terms of confidence, because I was struggling with Death Company. I haven't felt Death Company are as good since the new codex. I tried a few different lists. I wasn't really pleased with any single one of them. And then I got the second impulsor, and I thought to myself, like, I've just bought the second impulsor. I guess I'm going to build a list around running 2 impulsors. So I dropped all the Death Company, and I settled on 2 impulsors, and I practiced it, right? Like, I practiced it like 5 times, and I had a few people on my chat and in the comments tell me they didn't think it was a very good list. And I'm not immune to negative comments, right? Like, so I wasn't convinced in my head it was the greatest list. And also, I wasn't running some of the most meta stuff, like the Spiky Rage Fueled Warrior. I just wasn't running it. I played it a couple of times, and it swings both ways, right? Like, it swings to the point where, like, I did it on stream where I rolled every single attack and got 6 on every single attack and spiked a crazy amount of Power Fist attacks. But I also played it where I didn't get a single 6 even with Oath of Moment, and it did nothing. So I decided, like, it's swingy. I don't really like playing things that are crazy swingy, so I just left it. Yeah, so I was going to a city with double the population of where I live, basically. And it's the first time... Yeah, it was September 21 where I last went to a tournament out with my cities. The last time, like, I went away from my family for an event. And that's like 3.5 years. I don't know where the 3.5 years have gone, but that's apparently what it was. And I got to meet a bunch of new people and had a bunch of really good games. So I was actually really pleased. Going into the tournament not feeling it, not knowing if my list is good, I came out of the tournament with like a rejuvenated, excited perspective on Warhammer and on Liberator Assault Group maybe, and on the fact that you can make Liberator Assault Group work in many different ways. And I think when we break down all the battles that I played in, I think you'll see that this list actually, like, the 7-point loss and even the 17-point loss to Gav, with some small adjustments, based on my inexperience against the armies that I lost to, that could have easily been 5 wins. So, I also went back to check, when was it that I last went out of town? And this was the list that I ran in September 2021, for the last time I left town and travelled more than like 50 miles to go to a tournament. And this is what we were running in September 21, was like double Redemptor Dreadnought, Bolter and Scepters, still have those Blade Guard, still have those Sangre Guard. We had the Captain on a bike, we had the Chaplain on a bike, we had attack bikes, we had the Librarian with the jump pack, we still had the Infiltrators, a Tech Marine, the Whirlwind, and Lightning Claw Van Vets. And, well, there's one with a Thunder Hammer as well, back when you had to pay for war gear. And do you know what? This slide, this picture, whatever you want to call it, made me just remember that sometimes you'll buy a unit, like a Redemptor Dreadnought, that doesn't get any competitive play right now, But at some point in the future, it all swings back round. You know, like, I think I hadn't been using Blade Guard. Well, I never used them in my list where I won the tournament last summer, right? So, like, these Blade Guard had been in a cupboard for 2 or 3 years, and now they're back. I definitely had played tournaments without infiltrators. You know, they're back as well. I am at the moment not playing Inceptors, but here was me playing Inceptors 3 years ago. So I guess it just shows me that, like, when people ask you about, like, this unit or that unit, you can always find a place for a unit in a list. And I want to say that this was so not meta when I was playing it in 2021. And speaking of which, this is the Blood Angels list, or this was the list that I actually beat Innes with. And Innes has gone on to do great things, right? Like, he was just running really high tables at LVO, and he just won, like, the Manchester GT or whatnot. And it just shows that, like, if you take some random stuff that you own, because this was anything but meta, you can do well because people don't know how to play against it. So I did wonder if my list that I was running at this tournament had a degree of that. Like, nobody had been playing against anything like I was running, and I've got a photo of it in just a second. So maybe that helps me, right? Because no one's got experience against it. So, I've got the battle points right here. 3, 8, 9, my path 11th. So I beat Tau, Retaliation Cadre. Then I lost to the Demonic Incursion. And my opponent was a very solid player, but he had like 2 turns of crazy saves. So we'll go into that. Because actually, in hindsight, going back to that game, I don't know if I made too many mistakes. I made one, which would have definitely could have maybe swung it, but I also got unstuck a little bit on the massive amount of 4-ups. I beat Drukhari, which was actually a really tough game. I was behind turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. And while I do go behind a lot on my stream, it feels harder to go behind on an event, right? Like, you're just behind every single turn, and you have to bring those points in the final turn. And I was a little bit upset, I guess, because I'd lost that demon game. So my head was a little bit like, you know, when you take a loss that you feel like you could have won, and I definitely feel like I could have won this game. I was replaying some of this game in my head, and I was like, halfway through the Drukhari game, I was like, all right, come on, focus up. You need to win this Drukhari game. So this was actually a really tough game as well. End of day 1, and you're tired. Start of day 2 was Gavs. I don't know how many guardsmen it must have been, but it must have been about 150 guardsmen running that bridgehead strike detachment. And that detachment, I believe, has already been nerfed. So I played it pre-nerf. And before the tournament, I had just stuck my head in the sand and not looked at this list. Because I was like, I just don't want to play like 150, 200 guardsmen, because it's not dumb, but it kind of is, you know. It's just like, it's not super fun to just play against all those guardsmen. So I hadn't looked at the list, and I guess maybe if I'd done a little bit more research, there could have probably been a 10-point swing in there, and we'll cover that. And that's why I actually think my list had a lot of legs, because the reason I lost this game was not the units that I picked in the list. It was a couple of misplays. So hopefully when I break that game down, if you ever have to fight 200 guardsmen, I can teach you something. And then I had sort of a standard game against orcs. I know exactly what orcs are going to do. I play them a lot on my stream. So we'll talk through that game as well. And I took photos of every game, and probably next week I'll try and break down a bunch of those, explain tips, mistakes. And I think probably in every game there was like a small mistake or something. So we can touch on all of it. So while I feel my list seems a little unconventional, actually, and I was convinced when I went to the event I wasn't going to do that well because I wasn't sure about the list. I actually felt super comfortable playing it by the end of the event, and I actually really, really like it. I've been trying to think about how I'm going to tweak it, and there is tweaks I could make, and I can touch on some of them, but I actually really, really like this list. So this is the list, and I've got a photo of it in it. You've got a captain with a plasma and power fist. He is attached to a unit of company heroes. You're a captain with a jump pack with his enhancement gift of foresight, and he is attached to 3 Sanguinary Guard. That means that I'm getting like a free stratagem on that small squad of Sanguinary Guard. It means that like for example, Heroic Intervention. I am also going to get like Armor of Contempt potentially for free. I'm also going to be able to flip 1 dice to a 6. I'll either use that for a save or an additional devastating wound from his Thunderhammer. I've got a Chaplain with the Speed of the Primarch enhancement, and he's attached to the Blade Guard. That gives them once per game fight first. The Chaplain will also remove Battle Shock once per game within 12 inches, which is very, very useful. And then I've got Dante, and he is attached to 6 Sangre Guard. For Battle Line, I have nothing, and this really didn't come up that often, if at all. I guess Games Workshop need to push the emphasis to have Battle Line a little bit harder, because it never affected me negatively. I have 2 Impulsors, both with the Shield Domes, both with Stubbers. I have a unit of Assault Intercessors with Jump Packs, Power Fists, Chain Swords, and I would put these guys in reserve every game. I have the Ballistus Dreadnought, which of course is now 120 points. I wouldn't have updated that since last time, because I edited this to my most up-to-date list. I have a squad of Infiltrators to defend my home field objective. I have a unit of Outriders, and they will be kind of my throwaway early game. You know, like when you get those objectives, what would it be, like Area Denial, Establish Locusts, you've got to throw something out into the middle of nowhere. This was my unit to do that with, right? They're probably going to be my most forward deployed unit, and then they can tussle, right? Like, for example, in the Orc game, the Orc player did the same thing. He put a unit of 5 Storm Boys on an objective. Well, Blade Guard with Strength 7, -1, flat 2 damage. They just lift the unit of... Sorry, Blade Guard. Outriders with Strength 7, -1, 2 damage will just lift a unit of Orcs fairly reliably now. We have the Destructor with its Hunter Killer Missile, Las Cannons, Autocannons. We have a squad of Scouts with Chainswords, Missile Launchers, and the Combat Knives, in case we have to get into combat. And then we have a Vindicator tank with a Hunter Killer Missile and Stormbolter. And this is what the list looks something like. What disappointed me in this photo is this list looks way less painted than what the list I had in 2021 looked like. So it's just like, yeah, I guess when you don't have kids, or you've only got one very young kid, you get a lot more painting done. So I felt disappointed. So I need to do like a week on stream where I just don't make a tactics video, I just paint every single night. I'm going to do that at some point. I don't know what month we'll do it in, but and we'll try and actually finish this damn Predator tank or something before it goes into Legends. So for avoidance of doubt, this is a Laser Destroyer Vindicator tank, but I just ran it as the standard Vindicator because obviously you can't use Legends. And so you've got your Assault Intercessors, your Outriders, your Company Heroes, which I always put in the red Impulsor to keep it simple. The Chaplain leading the Blade Guard, I put the black Chaplain in the black Impulsor. I put Dante and his Sangre Guard in reserve every game, along with the Assault Intercessors and the Vindicator tank. I've seen a lot of people run double Vindicator, and I guess the way they do that is they usually put one in reserve, because if one comes in from reserve and you shoot your Oath target, that is a lot of damage almost guaranteed, especially if you blow the Hunter Killer Missile. The unit of Infiltrators for the home field, the Ballistus Dreadnought, the small unit of Sangre Guard always on the board, and the Scouts, who were usually forward deployed on an objective, and then they just get lifted every single turn, because they have the Guerrilla Tactics rule that's them up and down every single turn. And these guys score points all the time, and if there's no scoring to do, then I guess we get one missile. I think I actually killed something with the missile over the course of the event, and I probably fired it in like every single game. Okay, so the obvious question's out the way. Why does this list not include the strongest choices, or the strongest meta choices, like Ragefield Warrior plus Assault Intercessors, or Lamartis and his Death Company, right? I think I tend to experiment a bit on my weekly streams. People always want to see me try different models, and one of the models I recently got was the second Impulsor. And I was bought an Impulsor by someone that watches the stream, so I thought I would give it a whirl. And I'd also had trouble screening and holding objectives a little bit with Liberator Assault Group. And I like the strength of the Impulsor, and the 5-up invulnerable save can be really meaningful. In fact, my opponent in turn 1 in the Tau game shot an Impulsor with like 2 railguns that are flat 16 damage. And I spiked the 5-ups and it did nothing. The Impulsor just laughed in its face. So I do like Impulsors. Yes, that doesn't happen all the time, but in general, my impulsors are actually very, very useful. And I also really enjoy the damage output of the Fight First Blade Guards with Savage Echoes and the Chaplain Leader, because the Chaplain Leader is going to give them +1 to wound all the time. They're going to get to reroll 1s to hit basically all the time because of like their special ability Sword of the Imperium. And I felt like that was a really strong combo, so I just started to practice it. And I think the one thing that was different, if we go back to the summer, is now Blood Angels have advance and charge. So if a squad of like 6 Blade Guard and a Chaplain are coming out of an Impulsor, they've got 9 inches straight away. Then they have potentially 3d6 more movement with the advance and charge. And if they do fail their charge, and they get charged, well, who cares? They're fighting first. So I thought I'd start experimenting around that. And also, if you remember my list in the summer, I had that unit of company heroes with the captain in an Impulsor. And I still think that is a very underlooked combo. They're really good at precisioning things, and they're also crazy durable. I think in one game, I think I should have got them out of the Impulsor earlier against the Imperial Guard, because I think they would have actually been one of my best units against the spam of the Guardsmen. And they did really well when they came out. I think they ended the game unwounded, and they killed probably like 30 Krieg. But so I sort of doubled down on the double Impulsor, and I kept some of the other stuff that was working for my GT win, because I felt like I'd won a GT with certain units, and I felt like that fit my playstyle, so I'd keep some of my playstyle from the Sons of Sanguinius Detachment and adapt it into Liberator Assault Group. And I guess this is one thing that I really want to make clear is, like, yes, there is meta ways to run Blood Angels, but that is not the only way you have to run Blood Angels. And I felt like when I won the GT in the summer, I felt like I showed that you do not have to run the meta, the strongest things, in every single game or every single event to win tournaments. Because I think if we go back to the summer when I won the GT, no one was running the same list as me, right? I think even after I won the event, no one ran the same list as me, right? Like, certain people just maybe didn't see it strong, or certain people play Blood Angels different ways. So I think this is the exact same thing. I like to run Blood Angels the way I like to run them. Learn what you can from me, but do your own thing, ultimately. And if you want to copy the meta, by all means. I mean, I'm not above copying the meta. Might do that at some point. But I also do quite enjoy building lists. So, what do I think this list was missing, right? I did kind of enjoy the interview that I had with Borgia. Borgia was like the best Blood Angels player from the World Team Championships last year, and he had that double Ball Predator. And I felt like into the hordes of Guardsmen or the Drukhari that I played against, all those Flamers and the Ball Predators would have been super useful. And I felt like my list actually doesn't really have an Overwatch threat. Like, I don't have a single unit that's good at Overwatch. The only thing I might ever Overwatch is the Oath the Moment target if it moves too close to the Vindicator or a Predator tank. But for the most part, I'm not using Overwatch. I felt like I would have liked to have that option. I also had some issues finishing off enemy units, right? In the summer, when I was running the Sangre Guard with Dante, well, I had 50 attacks on the Sangre Guard, because you used to have 10 models. So we've lost 20 attacks. And also, in the summer, I had all those mass Power Fist Death Company squads. And I guess I feel like we've lost those as well. So this list relies more on, like, the tanks to soften up some of the enemies, and then charge and finish them off. But I am very reliant on shooting certain units to weaken them before I charge them. Which I don't think I was quite... It wasn't quite the same in the summer, right? Because Death Company were just all armed with Power Fist and Infernal Pistols, with rerolls to hit. And in the summer, the Sangre Guard, the 10 of them that I was running, were also armed with 10 Infernal Pistols. So they would typically weaken whatever they're charging first, because, hey, 10 Infernal Pistols is probably going to mean the enemy makes some failed saves, and they were +1 to hit as well. Sometimes this went perfectly. Sometimes it didn't, and it definitely swung against me in the Demons game. And I think that's just because the tanks probably have lack of shoot. You know, none of my tanks have a lot of shots. You know, like, it's 2 las cannons here, or like 4 autocannon shots, or like the Vindicator Demolisher cannon, which can swing a little bit, right? And then the one thing I did want to say is, did you ever hear the tragedy of the Gladiator tank that got one shot with a Ballistus Dreadnought? Because that is a rumor that was floating around in my Discord, that was like, somebody said that in turn 1, a Ballistus Dreadnought 40 odd inches away blew up a gladiator tank one shot. And it was like, it was a bit like the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise from Star Wars, right? It was like, did anyone actually believe that happened? Well, in this game, I actually stopped and took a photo of it. My opponent, Orc, had towed onto this objective at the start of turn 2. And this Ballistus Dreadnought, with one, like, I actually oathed this battle wagon, but I wouldn't have needed oath because the Ballistus Dreadnought actually, because I planned to shoot it with everything I have. But the Ballistus Dreadnought did he just did 12 damage from his crack missile straight away, double 6, boom. I was like, oh my god. So I had to wound on 5s, and he had to like fail the save on probably like, because he would have been ignoring 1 AP because it has armor of contempt equivalent, and he's got cover. So I think he would have been saving on 3s. So he must have rolled like a double 2, and then I rolled the double. So I rolled doubles 5, double 6, boom, 12 damage, and then a single las cannon shot snuck through, and that was it. 160 point battle wagon destroyed from 36 inches away, and that was huge, right? This Orc player had like 20 boys inside, and when they all jump out, now my Predator tank has free fire, now the Vindicator tank has free fire, and then you can maybe see it right there. The company heroes were right next to it as well. I thought I was going to actually end up having to use company heroes to throw grenades to get that thing to pop open so the company heroes could charge inside, but that was a huge play. The Ballistus Dreadnought doesn't happen very often, but people always say like, oh, I never see the Ballistus do anything. Well, I've seen it do stuff for about a year at this point, and now I've finally seen the legendary Ballistus Dreadnought that's going to blow up a bloody toughness 12 battle wagon from about 40 inches away. It was nice. Okay, please do subscribe to the channel, though. If you enjoy the videos that I make, I am here probably every week trying to impart some Blood Angels knowledge on you. So subscribe, leave a like, I appreciate it. Click the bell if you want to be notified every time I make a new video. So here's the strategy then for this list, right? Dante and the Sanguinary Guard into reserve every game. Jump Intercessors reserve, Vindicator tank reserve. So 3 units in reserve. Scouts will be on the board, but they're getting lifted. I made a little card. I'll share it so you can print out for yourself. But I made a little card to remind myself to lift the scouts every single turn. So in turn 2 or 3, I'm going to look for an opportunity to have the Vindicator deal with a critical target, right? The Vindicator is 24 inches of range. I know I'll be bringing it in. I'll know I'm putting down Oath of the Moment. And then probably I'm going to rapid ingress the Sanguinary Guard or the Jump Assault Intercessors the turn before. So it'll be like, in my opponent's turn 2, I'm going to rapid ingress my unit. Then I'm going to bring the Vindicator tank down. Then I'm going to Oath of the Moment that unit. So it's going to be like the Oath of the Moment of the Vindicator tank plus one of those jump units is just going to destroy something. And for the most part, that worked fairly well. There's a couple of the 2 games that I lost, small mistakes on target priority probably was the reason that I lost these games. And it's lack of knowledge of the opponent more than this play actually being bad. Like, this is a good play, especially if, like, the other thing about the Ballistus and the Predators, they got giant range, right? 48 inches. So if you are going to do that, there's also a good chance that one or both of those will be able to hit the same target as well. And then you've got the Ballistus, the Predator, and a Vindicator tank oathed into something with a jump unit following it in, and or a unit advancing out of a transport following it in, and that usually works pretty darn well. So I try to park both impulsors on objectives in no man's land and threaten with my 2 disembarks and my advance and charge. And obviously, if my opponent manages to charge my impulsors, which are usually going to be obscured behind a piece of terrain, do I care? It's an 80-point impulsor. The answer is no. They're going to have to do some sort of mad multi-charge and try and wrap me. And even then, I'll probably just end up doing an emergency disembarkation, and I'll probably lose very little except the impulsor. The scouts would typically forward deploy to resist my opponent's like scout moves, or to restrict my opponents with any scout moves they have or any forward deploy they have. And then I'm going to just lift them with guerrilla tactics every time and score and use them to screen my backfield. Early game losses of outriders and or impulsors. So like in turn 1 or 2, if I get missions that need me to be on the secondaries or the objectives in the middle of the map, I am going to use literally the cheapest things that I have. The outriders and the impulsors, the 80-point units, the more durable units, and I'm going to put them out. And I'm fully expecting them to die. I quite often think If in turn 1, the only thing I lose is like a couple of Outriders or even the whole Outrider squad, I'm probably fine with that, right? Like, you gotta lose some units. You gotta commit something into bad positions. And the Outriders and Impulsors are the units that I'm going to be committing into bad positions, because if I lose them, honestly, I don't really care. The Captain and the 3 Sanguinary Guard are like a reactive unit. They're going to deploy concealed, they're going to screen my deployment zone early game, and then they're going to react to wherever I need them to mop some units up. They're not going to do a massive amount of damage, but it's still 21 2 damage attacks, and they do have really high strength, and they can get some dev wounds. The long range guns on my tanks and the infiltrators and the scouts meant that my screening is generally very good. With those impulsors parked, what would I call it? With the impulsors parked on my side of the board, generally I can screen the entire DZ fairly well. Do you know what? I'll show you a screenshot of that right now, actually. So this was a hammer and anvil deployment, so you're basically talking about the line for deployment being around here. You can see the infiltrators have screened probably this entire area. This impulsor sitting here has screened probably to about here. Down this side, you've got the bikes screening all this area as well. The scouts were originally on this objective. They've been picked up and pulled back. They're now screening here. So there was literally no space for the 6-inch deep strike denial from the Imperial Guard anywhere. Like, that just wasn't an option in my half of the board. And I'm on 2 objectives, and nothing is committed at this point, right? Like, well, I mean, 1 unit of Sanguinary Guard was committed, so this would have been like the end of turn 1, I think, this unit of Sanguinary Guard committed. He'd brought like a unit of, was it like Jungle Fighters over here? And I had engaged on all fronts, so I needed to get across the line anyway. And I probably wanted to sacrifice a cheaper unit, but I don't think I had the choice. Maybe I could have, I think I'd started the bikes right in the backfield, so maybe there was a slight misplay with my deployment. But I guess my point was, like, in terms of screening, with what I had, I was able to screen like half the board very, very effectively, and make it difficult for my opponent to find opportunities to penetrate me. And like I said, the 2 things that were the most furthest forward in a lot of my games are the 2 impulsors. So like, how is my opponent getting line of sight to kill these impulsors? And even if he does, do I care? Because the units inside will just spill out onto the objectives. And in this case over here, I'm going to still hold the objective. In this case over here, I'm still going to hold the objective, right? So it was like the impulsors were sort of my like threat units. And like I said, you got 9-inch disembarkation, plus advance, plus charge. So yeah, at one point later in the game, these company heroes jumped out here, moved around another unit with advance and charge, and then charged over here. And I guess over here there was a nice little, you know, like a 9 is putting me almost at this wall. This wall is actually kind of the perfect place for this wall to be, because that is charging from an obscured position. An obscured position against these stupidly strong guardsmen is actually what you need to be doing. So, I chose tactical objectives in every matchup. The scouts are a huge MVP scoring unit, because once they've screened out the backfield for like turn 1 or 2, they can go anywhere you want usually and do actions. They can help upholding primaries. The Blade Guard and the Sanguinary Guard don't really need Oath of Moment, so I'm free to use it anywhere else. You know, like I can use it on those units to give them a little bit more punch, but again, that means I can pick it for any of my tanks. I can pick it for the Outriders. I can pick it for the company heroes. I can pick it for that smaller squad of Sanguinary Guard as well, because they don't have any +1 to hit. So basically, my reliability in terms of damage is very good. The impulsors, like I showed you, they're always going to be in awkward to reach terrain pieces. They're pushed up to the walls, so that I'm going to basically aggressive onslaught, which is advance and charge out of them. The amount of times the impulsors end up doing like sabotage or nonsense like that as well, recovering assets, cleansing, containments. The impulsors did it all. The impulsors are really, really strong pieces for just, you don't give up too much for them doing the actions, right? You give up a bunch of bolters. Oh no. Typically, I would use Red Rampage on Dante's unit whenever it was going for tough targets, right? But I would use Red Rampage on other units as well that just wanted +1 to wound, basically. But Dante's unit, getting him, and then potentially getting battle shocked and then having the battle shock cleansed by the chaplain is obviously an option. And I was using Savage Echoes if the Blade Guard were charged, right? When the Blade Guard get charged, give them an extra attack. They already have +1 to wound. They already re-rolling ones to hit. And they're fighting first, so they're very strong. Other common stratagems I'm using a lot of was like Tank Shock. You'd be surprised at how often I Tank Shock with like, I think both the Impulsors, Vindicator and the Ballistas all got in some Tank Shock action. I think 2 or 3 units got in some grenade actions. Armor of Contempt honestly feels kind of pointless now. That's the most disappointing thing, I think. It feels meaningful if you get charged by 1 unit, but it feels like it's very rarely useful in the shooting phase. I guess Go to Ground might actually be better now. And everyone forgets about Go to Ground. I never used it at this event, but would it have been useful to have cover possibly on a unit, on an infantry unit that was out in the open? Probably, actually. Probably would have got me a couple of 3-up saves as opposed to 4-up saves from like AP2 shots. I just completely forgot about it, and like I said, Armor of Contempt feels so bad now. For example, at one point I did actually Armor of Contempt. I think it was a unit of Sanguinary Guard to survive like a unit of Tempest Scions with all their overcharged plasmas. Well, the second he finished shooting the 1 unit of Tempest Scions, he just targeted me with another unit of Tempest Scions, and he was like, now your Armor of Contempt doesn't activate anymore. And I was like, yeah, I know. But thanks, like, I'm already upset about it. You don't need to rub it in. So Armor of Contempt felt pretty bad. Okay, what are the strengths of my list, right? Like, I have 15 jump infantry, 3 bikes, 2 potential 9-inch disembarks, and all of this shit can advance and charge, right? So, like, speed, I think, is not a problem for Blood Angels. And that's the main difference, probably. Like, when we're running Sons of Sanguinius in the summer, we didn't have advance and charge. Now we advance and charge. I feel like we're not super CP dependent. Like, in the summer, we always needed to keep CP, 2 CP in fact, for Fight on Death. We don't have that anymore. Most of our strats are 1 CP. In fact, I don't think any are 2 CP. So, I feel like we are very fast. And having the captain leading a couple of units is actually super important, because the reduction of 1 CP means that sometimes you can advance and charge on a squad and you don't even need to pay the CP. It's very strong. Screening, scoring secondaries, for the most part, I feel like I handled very well. The scouts are honestly so strong for this. I had them out of my list and brought them back like a month or like 4 weeks before the tournament, and like I don't know how I ever played without the scouts. The scouts just score you like 20 victory points every game. And I think in this event, I don't think an opponent ever killed the scouts. I think maybe somebody killed like 2 of them or 3 of them, but the scouts never died. Rapid Ingress with an obscure jump infantry is still like crazy strong. The toss up, I guess, of this is that the lack of Infernal Pistols really hurt the reliability of the Rapid Ingress. And you know what? I heard a really interesting thing about someone saying about Terminator's Rapid Ingressing. And he was saying like that what he did, and I think this was from LVO, he said that he put his teleport homer just on the other side of a piece of terrain quite far forward every single game. And he's running the double Vindicator, and the idea was that meant he was going to be able, like if you put your teleport homer here, for example, this terrain isn't the best, maybe one that had terrain closer to the middle objective, but if you put it just on your side, 3.5 inches from the wall, he basically said, what that means is that the opponent want to stop you using your teleport homer and getting your free rapid ingress. They have to come the other side of the wall. The second they come on the other side of the wall, then they're in range and targetable by both your Vindicator tanks. I was like, wow, that's actually really strong. And I think he said he went 5-1 at a big event by running 10 Terminators, going for the midfield, and putting the teleport homer down just on your side of the terrain. So he's got rapid ingress, almost guaranteed, unless the opponent wants to desperately stop them. And in that case, the 2 Vindicator tanks probably left off their unit. So that's pretty cool. I think the tanks bring quite a lot to my army for the points I spent on them, right? I think I've spent like 430, 440 points on tanks. They tend to put in consistent performances, and sometimes I feel like the tanks can actually be the MVP in this list, right? Like, because no one's really shooting or dealing with the tanks. You'll see that when I break down the games. people are dealing with the Blade Guard, people are dealing with the Sangre Guard. The tanks are still there usually at the end of the games. And I think that's possibly the annoying thing in a game or two that I lost, is like the tanks are still there with a lot of wounds, and they have killed a lot. They just maybe don't have the greatest OC levels, right? And I guess that's what I was going to touch on next, is against some less OC forces, I can take objectives with ease. But if the enemy are like Kriegsmen, and they can have, I think those Kriegsmen can literally be OC3 each, and there can be 30 guys in the squad. So they can literally put 90 OC on an objective. Beats me why they're allowed to have 90 OC, honestly. Oh, and they can insane bravery on multiple squads multiple times per game. Also beats me. But I'm not bitter at all about... I just don't like fighting giant hordes of guardsmen. Do you know what? Mordy and Glory made fun of me last time for getting beat by the giant horde of guardsmen. So he'd probably make a video reacting and make fun of me again. If you haven't checked out Mordy and Glory, you can check him out. He's like a giant creator that just does Astra Militarum, I believe. I feel like the very powerful Chaplain ability to remove Battle Shock is just useful. It removes those negatives from the lag stratagems, and it also potentially just saves you like a Battle Shock check if you desperately need it. I have an overwhelming number of attacks on my MSU units because I'm a Liberator Assault Group, so generally I do a lot of killing. I had one less unit than my tournament win in the summer, so 13 units on the battlefield, which I feel like is okay for tactical objectives. Obviously the more is better, but 13 is okay. So the weakness is there is no battle line. I also have no mega OC units. Like I felt like my Sangre Guard having an OC of like, I think it's 22 is pretty good. No, it's 7 guys times 2. 14? Okay, I think my OC of 14 was pretty good. Apparently it is not. I don't know where I got 22. Oh, I think I had the 6 Sangre Guard Dante and the Blade Guard on an objective together. And I think that was 22. Typically all my melee is strength 7, 8, or 9. Meaning I lack killing power against toughness 10 or higher. And I think before, that's where the Death Company came in with a crap load of strength 10 power fists. And I guess that's where some people are finding a lot of joy with a crap load of Terminators with strength 10 power fists. I don't have any of that, so I need my tanks to do some of the heavy lifting for me. Marines also hate high strength and AP. And the Armor of Contempt nerf hurts a lot. Like, plasma guns just rip through Space Marine armor like it isn't even there. Unless you can spike 4-up saves, which we all know sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't happen. And I guess when I needed the 4-up saves to spike in this event, it didn't happen. And when I didn't need it, it did happen. So that's sometimes the way it goes. And I have a real lack of trading pieces in this list, right? Like I have my 1 unit of Jump Intercessors and my 1 unit of Outriders, and everything else is kind of expensive. So that is a negative with my list. Would I like to have more Jump Intercessors in there? Yes. Would I like to have more Outriders in there? Yes. I have to give up some of the Impulsor fun to do that, and I really like the units inside there, but that is definitely a weakness, I felt like. Because I was thinking about it, like I could drop almost like an Impulsor, the Company Heroes, and the Captain, have 2 more Jump Intercessors and an Outriders. That gives me ton more trading units. Doesn't give me the same level of durability on objectives, which I actually do really like, and I think that's why every game, even the games I lost, I had high points. Because by having that high level of durability, you never just get run over, right? Like, I mean, I've had events where I've done really well up until like the final game, and then I've just been absolutely run over, everything died, and I scored like 20 points, and, you know, like, so I went 4-0, got to the final table, and then just got crushed so bad I don't even finish like in the top 10. That's happened before with Space Marines, and that can happen, like I said. And I think this list, this is definitely a durable Blood Angels list, right? Like 5 units of armor. The Company Heroes, very durable. The Blade Guard with all their Storm Shields, very durable. 3 units of Sangre Guard, all with invuns, durable. Bikes, more durable than Jump Intercessors. So this is probably as durable as you're going to get out with running Gravis Marines, right? Alright, let's talk about some thoughts, some scoring, right? So, how good was this list at obsecking and objective holding, right? Well, the Infiltrators were pretty good at holding the backfield. The Outriders were pretty cheap. The Impulsors were also pretty good at least surviving on objectives. But the 2 games I lost, I did lose my home field objective. So, I mean, that's on me for probably not playing this as well as I could. So I'd say it's like a 7.5 out of 10. How good was I killing hordes, right? Compared to my list in the summer, I feel like I lost some strength in terms of, like, I had less jump units, which meant less chainsword attacks. The 2 infantry-heavy armies I played, Guard and to a lesser extent Drukhari, were actually both very difficult games. I just didn't have the trading units, I just didn't have as many chainswords. So I think it's like an 8 out of 10. Like I said, I had no real Overwatch threat that was going to threaten infantry like potentially a Bal Predator could. Anti-vehicle, anti-monster. So with the loss of the massive amount of power fists I used to run in the Death Company, and the loss of 20 attacks in the Sangre Guard, I actually came a bit stuck into that Greater Demons list. I didn't have the overkill potential that I had before. I feel like the Vindicator tank is typically great, but again, doesn't have a massive weight of fire, and demons can roll 4 up sometimes and spike that pretty hard, and that 100% happened to me. I hadn't played too many greater demons, or more than a couple, and I'd usually dealt with them pretty well. Unfortunately, I didn't deal with them well in this, so I feel like my anti-monster was probably also an 8 out of 10. Mobility was something that I felt really strong on, right? Like, rarely was speed a problem. I got every unit where I needed to go. In the summer, we didn't have advance and charge. Now we do. I feel like mobility was just, it was never an issue. This has opened up like a bunch of new options for us. I actually think coming out the transports with that extra advance and charge is super scary. The threat range is kind of insane. It's 9 plus 3d6, which means realistically anything like, if the enemy moves within 18 inches of your transport, you're probably going to be able to charge them pretty darn reliably. And then what about specialization, right? So although I lost 2 games here, I actually felt Liberator Assault Group is a more flexible detachment than Sons of Sanguinius, right? In the summer when I won the GD with Sons of Sanguinius, I just hang on to fight on death, CP for fight on death, and just fought on death every single time anyone engaged my units, and I just traded all over the board. It was very simple. You just needed to save the CP for fight on death. This list felt like it had good answers for everything I played. Maybe it needed a bit of more like overcommitment in certain situations, just to like mop up greater demons, or overcommitment to deal with a 30-man unit of Krieg. I actually don't think there's 30 in the squad. I think that's probably what confused me. But we'll talk about the Krieg and the Astra Militarum in a video in the very near future. When I do break things down, I think I was only a few plays away from winning the games that I lost. And I would say that was from inexperience against those armies, as opposed to the list itself. So I think that if I went and focused down on this list for 20 more games, I actually think this is a very strong list that has a lot of answers. And I enjoyed playing it a lot more than I've thought I would, probably. Like, I think I enjoyed this event the most I've enjoyed an event for a while, because maybe this list just fits with everything I do. And all the units felt like they stuck around. And, you know, it's the first time I've actually played the Sangre Guard event with a 4-up in Vun save. And before, I felt like the Sangre Guard had paper armor. So maybe this is the first time that I actually felt like it feels pretty good to be playing Sangre Guard. They still don't survive super well. There's a lot of things that are very efficient at killing them. But at least I felt like I got a save, right? Like, whereas before, I feel like you maybe didn't even get a save with those guys, and it was just horrific. So, overall thoughts. So typically after an event in which you fail or lose games, the first thing you do is like you jump on and you're like, I'm going to make some new lists. And while I do think that can be a good idea, or it could be therapeutic, or you could have noticed a weakness, I feel like I did have the tools in this list. I just didn't use them quite right. So like over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to try and break down the games. And I actually was thinking about this as I knew I was going to make this video. So I was thinking, like, if you are at an event, so much is happening at an event in the games It's hard to remember what happened in specific turns. It can all blend together. I think it's a good idea to take a couple of photos throughout each game and try and go back and learn from what misplays were made. Because I obviously do it for these videos. But if you guys go to an event, like, you should be analysing what the misplay... You shouldn't just be rushing off to make a new list. I mean, that is sort of the de facto thing that us Warhammer players do. We're like, oh, I should have had the Death Company. Why didn't I? I'm so stupid. But I think that... taking some photos and trying to learn from your misplays is something that you should do. And I actually think I'm quite proud of this. I think this list could win an event. I think I'll probably get forced by my community to play something else. But if I didn't have kids and I was able to go to another GT next weekend, I would actually make no changes. And I would just try and take from what I've learned, right? I think there's quite a few ways you can play lag. Obviously, you can see, you know, the 10-man Death Company, the Lamartas gets played a lot. The Double Predator gets played a lot. The Double Vindicator gets played a lot. But, like, yeah, take some photos of your event and try and use that to learn. So having won the GT in the summer, like, it's hard to say that I'm not disappointed going 3-2. I was very disappointed to lose the second game as well, because I feel like I could have played that one better. Because people ask me, like, oh, they're like, oh, are you here to win the event? And I was like, no, I don't feel confident with my list. But I think maybe it wasn't confidence with the list. Maybe it was just not confidence with the meta. Like, I've never played in that city before. I don't know what the meta is. I don't know the players. I don't know what to expect. And also, recently I'd had a bit of unluck in some of my practice games. I got beaten twice by the World Eaters. I always feel like the way that I beat World Eaters with Blood Angels is use my shooting against them. Because I think if you just go into straight up combat with them, you lose. But yeah, you know, and I guess in my game against Orcs, I basically did that exact same strategy. Like, I played it the same way I would play the World Eaters, and that, like, for the first 2 turns, the Orc was the only thing the Orc player was able to charge, even with his WAG. Like, I think when he used his WA, he was able to lift, like, my unit of company heroes and an impulsor, right? Like, I just didn't offer anything to him. I sat back. I played conservatively. I'm sure you've seen me play like that on my stream. It works very well for me. Maybe it's not the way everybody plays Blood Angels, but it works very well for me. And I think there was probably 5 winnable matches here. And that's probably more why I felt disappointed, because I feel like I could have possibly gone 4-1. It was definitely within my grasps. But here's the thing that I wanted to say and be honest, right? Honestly, it's super fucking hard to go 4-1 or even 5-0, right? Like, it took, like, I've been back in the hobby 8 years, maybe even 9 years now. I know because I bought some, I was looking at some Thousand Suns that I bought, and I saw the receipt said 2017, and I was like, oh my god, these guys have got, they're not even all, they're still on their sprue, and I bought them in 2017. This is embarrassing. But it took me 7 or 8 years to go 5-0. And I think in those 7 or 8 years, I think I went 4-1 like 3 times. So, like, I average going 4-1 like once every 2 or 3 years, and I average going 5-0 like once every 8 years. Like, it's friggin' hard to do this. And sometimes you need to ride your luck, and sometimes you need to make every decision the correct decision. And I guess I didn't make the correct decisions, so I was a little bit disappointed. But did I enjoy myself? Yes, way more than I expected to. I loved my list. So even though Blood Angels have one of the... And that's something else, right? Going into this event, I knew Blood Angels had a really low win rate right now. And I think in the future, I'm going to not pay any attention to that shit, because it does nothing positive for me. It just makes me question what I'm running. Like, Blood Angels have a low win rate, I'm running something weird, or I'm running something that I made up myself, it's not meta. So the win rate doesn't even affect me, right? Like, it shouldn't affect me, because my list is nothing like the meta. It's what I want to run. And I always, like, I went to an event in 9th edition with Mephiston, and at the time everyone was saying, like, don't run Mephiston, he's not a good character, he's too unreliable, don't run him. But I felt like I'd practiced him, and I wanted to run the list with Mephiston, because I don't think I'd run him to a tournament since I'd come back to the hobby like 8 or 9 years ago, like I'd said. So I just did it. I went to the tournament with Mephiston. After the tournament, straight away, I was like, oh yeah, I got to drop Mephiston. He's not reliable enough. But for the most part, because I practiced the list, I think I still went 3-2 in that event, and I'm pretty sure I probably did, because I don't typically ever end up worse than 3 or 2. But yeah, so I played him. I didn't like it. I changed it. But again, it was probably different from what the win rate was. So like, and I remember that. I think I remember that event being another time where the Blood Angels win rate was really low, because I think in that event I actually took 3 armigers. So it was like my melee Blood Angels army and then 3 Warglavies, the one with the melta guns on them. And I think that, you know, and I still went 3, like Blood Angels had a really low win rate at that point, let's say like 39, 40% again. But I still went 3 and 2, so I'm still doing fine, and I'm still grinding out some wins with a weird list. And I think that's... sure, if you're going to an event with the ultimate meta list, and the win rate is really bad, then you may need to put those two things together. But if you've created your own list that no one's got any experience against, but you've practiced, because I practiced this list, excuse me, 5 or 6 times before the event. Now I feel like I've practiced it like 11 times. And I actually feel really confident, and I'd like to run the list again. And I think, like, try and ignore the noise. Have confidence in yourself. Worst case, you have some fun and you make some new friends, right? So that is it for a bit of a breakdown on the GT. I hope you learned something. I'll try and put all the photos of the games, the wins and losses together. I'll try and talk through them, try and explain some of the choices and some of the mistakes in the coming week, and also some of the learnings, I guess. If you do want to support the channel, there is a Patreon link in the description. You can buy your Warhammer models from Element Games here in the UK or Wargame Portal in the US. Links are in the video description, and every purchase over on those sites does support the channel. If you didn't see last week's video on Jump Intercessors versus Outriders, and I still love both of these units. If you want to check out how they do when you run all the maths and compare them to each other, that video is available now. Thank you so much for sticking around and staying to the end of the video, guys. I'd love to see any questions or comments that you might have, and I will see you on the live stream this week and this weekend. By the blood are made strong, my friends. Peace.